You've now heard how the suspects framework will provide help in identifying and supporting new actions. But it's a basic principle of salmon conservation to control the controllables. To put it in simpler terms, if an action is identified which will help to conserve salmon, then you do it now, rather than waiting for a complete understanding of the life cycle threats. So I want to reassure you that action is being taken now, that further actions are being identified now, and that further action will continue to be identified and implemented while the suspect's process is developing. And I've been given 5 minutes to give you a few examples. Given the time constraint, I hope you'll excuse the lack of detail, and I'm a lawyer, so don't expect it to be poetic. The first example is dredging. Tracking on the Dee and on the River Bresle in northern France has demonstrated that dredging during the smolt run can have a significant effect on mortality. You may say, well, that's obvious, but the point there is demonstrating. This evidence has already been used to get agreement that dredging will not take place during the smolt run on the Dee, and it will also be used to seek similar agreements in France and in relation to planned dredging in Poole Harbour. The next example is netting. You've already heard something about this. Tracking can do more than identify migration routes. Tracking is also indicating that salmonids make regular deep dives during their migrations. And Dylan has already referred to the very extensive netting around the coast of the West Country intended to catch marine species, not salmonids. And there are restrictions to try to avoid bycatch, but some of the restrictions, just to give an example, are based on the idea that salmonids will primarily be in the top 5 meters of the water. So the evidence from tracking will be used to argue that those restrictions should be extended and refined when they are reviewed in the near future. Next, smolt fitness. You've heard something about this as well. Work on the Froome indicates that smolt size is reducing and that smaller smolts have a lower chance of returning. And a PhD is now underway which will use this information from a number of different rivers throughout the Northeast Atlantic to explore this further. And that's an early example of a key benefit of the Alliance, sharing information. And when you think of climate change and salmon, you may think it's something that only has effect at sea, but it may also be having effects on smolt fitness in fresh water, because the environment in which a young salmon develops can affect the fitness of the resulting smolt and adult salmon. And temperature is one such environmental factor, and that's something that is being investigated. Water quality. The Smart Rivers program involves species-level invertebrate surveys carried out by professionally trained and supervised citizen scientists. This highlights problems of water quality and provides evidence to persuade regulators to take action. And as an example, as a result of this work, the Environment Agency are now taking action in relation to salad washing on the Itchen. And this program is expanding into Scotland and Wales next year. And of course, water quality is another factor which could have an adverse effect on the fitness of smolts. Then very briefly, because you've heard about this, freshwater losses. As Louise has explained, this year's Moray Firth tracking has indicated significant losses in fresh water. Next year's tracking will therefore be designed to provide evidence of the causes of those losses to support action to reduce them. My point is that this research, of course, contributes to our overall understanding, but it may also lead to specific action in specific places. Next, salmon farming. In the case of salmon farming, there is already a substantial body of evidence to support a number of urgent, and I emphasize urgent, actions which have been identified and endorsed by the Scottish Parliamentary Committee inquiries. and which should be implemented without delay. In particular, to put in place for the first time a Scottish public authority charged with the statutory function to protect wild fish from the negative interactions of fish farming. Let me explain. The current position of the Scottish Government is that they do not have the power, they say, to protect wild fish from the effects of salmon farms such as sea lice. I'm not talking about inclination, I'm talking about power. They say they can only protect the farmed fish. Now, all members of the Alliance have as an agreed objective the urgent implementation of the regulatory changes and other recommendations of the inquiries. And we are campaigning and will continue to campaign to achieve this. Finally, policy. A lot of policy issues need addressing now, particularly in the context of Brexit. That is, policy relating to the environment generally, to agriculture and water management. More weight needs to be given to freshwater ecology and fish. There needs to be independent monitoring and proper enforcement, to give examples on sea lice counts and of the activities of water companies. There needs to be a truly independent and powerful body to ensure that public bodies apply environmental law. That will become particularly important if Brexit takes place. And in particular, we need to confront the lack of political will and resources to use existing powers and implement existing policies. And a coordinated campaign is being prepared. So by way of conclusion, these are just examples of actions that are already underway or identified. As the Suspects programme progresses, there will be more actions and they will be more comprehensive and supported by stronger evidence. But importantly, both now and in the future, our arguments and evidence will be much stronger and more effective now that we are together. Thank you very much.